So, good afternoon, everyone that's dialing in from the UK. And if you're dialing in from somewhere else in the world, welcome to you as well. Today's webinar is going to be on money without borders and how digital wallets enable global transactions. We're in partnership today with TerraPay, and we have David Backshall from TerraPay on the panel. Um, I am Robert Courtnidge. I've been part of the Payment Association since it was founded, along with Mr. Tony Craddock, who you will all know very well. Background is a lawyer for over 30 years in payments, and now work alongside Ricardo, who heads up the policy and public relations for the Payment Association. So we're working on your behalf with government, with the regulators, and with the central banks. To make sure that the industry voice is heard. Before I get started, I do want to give you a couple of housekeeping rules. First of all, captions are available for this session. If they're not showing for you, there's a toggle on the control bar at the bottom, so that should help you there. Also on that toggle bar at the bottom, you'll see there's a Q&A tab. You can use that to submit questions to the speakers. I, as moderator, will be checking those questions all the way through and will either put them to them at the relevant time, or I will wait to the Q&A session at the end and ask them. You can ask questions, by the way, anonymously if you like. You don't have to attach your name. Separately, if you do have any technical issues with this webinar, please send a message through on the chat box to Christina from the Payments Association, and she will help you. The webinar, by the way, will be recorded, and you will be able to access it on demand within 48 hours. So look out for your email from the Payments Association on how you do that. So now let's bring on each of the speakers. First of all, from our sponsor, TerraPay, David Backshall. So David, could you just give yourself a quick intro and tell everyone who you are and why you like this topic?
Thanks, Robert. My name is David Backshall. I'm Vice President of Partnerships at TerraPay. I've been in payments for more than 25 years and been with TerraPay for the last 3. So it's a pleasure being on the panel today. TerraPay has long been involved with digital wallets globally over the past decade. It serves as part of the core value proposition that TerraPay has on its infrastructure. So we're very pleased to join the panel today and talk about the future of digital wallets on a global basis.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Next up, Natasha Zernma, and she is from Opti. Natasha, do you want to just quick introduce yourself, your company, and why you like this topic?
Thank you so much, Robert. It's great to be here. So I am Australian. I'm Natasha Zernama, and I am the CEO and founder of Opti. I was working in luxury fashion for 25 years before I established a payments business that is now across 140 countries. And the reason why I established it was the frustration around integration of payment methods for retailers, particularly in digital, but also right through omni-channel. So today I'm going to be actually wearing my retailer hat and giving you a lens on basically what digital wallets does for the economy for retailers, what it does for consumers, and focus on the way that we solution accessibility across the value chain to enable retailers to offer more ways to pay, but also the impact that that has on consumers all over the world. So thank you so much, Robert, David. It's great to be here.
Thank you. And finally, but not least, Gonzalo. Gonzalo's from Swift. If you want to just give yourself a quick intro to the watchers, the listeners.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Robert. Hi, everyone. My name is Gonzalo Perez. As Robert was saying, I work at Swift. And contrary to what David was saying, all this initiative is very new to Swift. So that's why we are very excited. It's a very strategic initiative, and we see a lot of value and potential. That's why we embarked in this joint venture, and we will try to bring a lot of value to the community by doing that. And well, I work in a team that we lead some strategic initiatives. In particularly, this one is led by me, and that's why we work very closely with David and the team in bringing this to the industry.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all. So I'm going to just kick off with the first topic that we're going to discuss, which is how a digital wallet's revolutionizing the way in which money moves globally. Obviously, there is a lot going on here. There's a lot of new wallets coming out all the time, but you've also got the big boys like the PayPals and the Wise and the Apple Pays and that are around there. And we've got a lot of sort of cross integration going on. So I'm just going to kick off with David, if that's okay. So David, give us a bit of background on why you think digital wallets are revolutionizing the way in which money moves.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Yeah, so TerraPay, as I said before, we've been working in digital wallets over the last decade, and that's where TerraPay as a business really specialized. And what we're seeing in terms of the trends, and in particular, by 2026, there's going to be over 5 billion people that are going to be using digital wallets around the world. So that's more than half the world's population. So we've seen this and seen this emergence of digital wallets for being used for remittances, and these person-to-person remittances will also be increasing as well. So some of the figures that we've got in terms of the trends is again, by 2026 we're going to be seeing an increase of 25% to more than 71 billion, and that's up from 29 billion in 2022. So what this states altogether is really the numbers really reflect the demand for wallets, and where their wallets are really prevalent are in those underserved markets, those emerging markets around the world. And TerraPay started off really connecting the dots to these wallets, across Africa and Asia Pacific, where there was an increased high penetration of wallets, and that came about because of obviously the infrastructure in these countries are not there. So it's giving the accessibility to the underbanked population to be able to be included as part of the kind of financial infrastructure. So as we're seeing this opportunity growing, we're seeing that new wallets are emerging all around the world. So every year there's a plethora of different wallets that come about. Latin America, we've seen some, like Nequi is an example in Colombia, and that growth and that demand for wallets, we're seeing that trend really continuing as well. And this is driving down the day-to-day cash that's being used, and now really people are utilizing these digital wallets, obviously receiving funds from diaspora that are sending funds back home, and then being able to use those funds in country. And when you look at some of these countries in terms of their GDP and what it represents in terms of the funds that are coming in cross-border for remittances, it makes up an increasing amount, a percentage of that country's GDP. So wallets, digital wallets, are super important for the country of where these wallets are launched, and the population that's using them for being able to have financial inclusion. So with this, we see that trend, and obviously the studies reflect that. And being able to connect all of these wallets together and allow consumers the choice to be able to send to these wallets is super important. And that's really where we have grown that business, and now we've made that accessible to other financial institutions around the world today.
Thank you, David. That was great. Natasha, could you put a bit of a merchant consumer perspective on wallets? How are they being perceived by the world at large?
Yeah, so just to really follow on from what David was saying, merchants want to offer consumers a way to pay that they are completely comfortable with. And as we see the emergence of more and more global trade within commerce, what we're experiencing is that having localized payment methods within international checkouts is becoming more and more important in terms of trust. So if I think about the key things that I feel that wallets are really delivering, obviously it is that access to financial services. So a secure way for people to store money and participate in the digital economy that haven't readily participated in the digital economy, I think is something that retailers are really embracing. Obviously, lower costs are what consumers are looking for, but also merchants. And when we look at the way that cross-border costs can be mitigated through wallet channels, that's obviously appealing completely across the value chain. For consumers, it's about security. It's about being able to store their money securely outside of a bank environment if they have trust issues with institutions, etc. And we certainly see that, and I'm sure David will talk a lot about that today in terms of those emerging markets and creating that trust factor through wallets. But it's also the simplified payments, providing financial literacy, and also peer-to-peer. So we see a lot of application for foreign workers who are sending money to family and what have you, and using the wallet rails or the wallet as a channel is certainly a way that we're definitely seeing as emerging and extremely rapidly. So thanks very much, Robert.
That's good. And finally, but certainly not least, Gonzalez, in relation to the sort of continued battle towards sort of environmental, social, and governance, the ESG agenda, how do you see that digital wallets are going to move that agenda forward?
Thanks, Robert. I think that's a key thing the wallets bring to the table when we're talking about financial inclusion, and it's very tied to what David and Natasha were explaining. There's lots of use cases, and they are coming by the day, new and new use cases where people using wallets in their day-to-day lives. I think we are going to touch base a little bit more in depth later. But the wallet brings that easiness of bringing the money to those underbanked populations where, if not, it will be a lot more difficult for them to get that money. It will be more costly, it will take more time, and that actually affects their day-to-day lives. And in turn, that affects the economy of that particular country. So I think having a well-oiled solution to be able to pay to the wallets is something that is not as simple that it looks like, oh, we're paying to a wallet. It actually has a lot of deep impact in the day-to-day lives, in people getting out of poverty and increasing the economies, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a ripple effect with something as simple as saying, I'm paying to a wallet. It actually has a massive effect in people's lives. And so for Swift, that's a very, very high level in our agenda, because financial inclusion is one of the things that we want to help the community tackle.
So yeah, I mean that's a good segue into the next section, particularly on financial inclusion. And we see that digital wallets are more and more building solutions for accessible, cost-effective financial tools for underbanked communities, those in geographic isolation or those with a lack of traditional banking around them. And I think David talked about the sort of projects in Africa that have been spouting up because again, it's a large geographical area with very low banked population. Perhaps we can use this next session to look at some maybe examples. And David, clearly you do have quite a few examples that you've cross-referenced already, but maybe you could give us a bit more detail in how you see the sort of key opportunities where these sort of digital wallets will help that underbanked community in certain territories.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So, we've got some of the stats we had in terms of the findings by the World Bank, which really state that there's currently 1.4 billion underbanked individuals globally, and really the way that we can serve those underbanked individuals is utilizing how they can be able to connect and, you know, with what the tools that they have today, which is normally by a mobile phone, and the wallets that are integrated into that particular infrastructure as well. So this is the, you know, for the unbanked population, by far the easiest way for them to have financial inclusion and to be able to be in a position where they can receive funds, and also small value funds, which is also, we've got to remember, is really important, which is about the cost of sending a cross-border transaction, which can be actually quite high as 8%. So really, you know, we need to look at how we can be very transparent on these cross-border transactions, how these transactions can be done on a 24/7 basis as well. So, you know, we've been, you know, working very closely with some of these operators, and that could be, you know, a key operator, for example, M-Pesa in Kenya, as an example, which has really, through that innovation, has really, you know, paved the way to show how a particular wallet has such an impact in a particular country, and high penetration, particularly with the unbanked as well, through a mobile wallet. So it's really important that you know, having a wallet like that, which is a stored value wallet, it's also regulated by the Central Bank of Kenya as well, to be able to create the value for those individuals, to be able to include those individuals to receive those funds and utilize that in country, and that's super important. So also with that, it's then educating and working and collaborating with other organizations, such as other fintechs or traditional banks, and also governments as well, to help you know, accelerate the adoption of mobile wallets as well, and looking through those partnerships of creating the ability for a easier way and more cost-effective way to do those cross-border transactions. And the other part of that is obviously the security and the trust element as well. Natasha touched upon that previously. And when we talk about trust and we look at these wallets in these particular regions, and of course as well, you know, the diaspora from these countries, you know, live and work all around the world, they always look for that particular brand. If they're sending funds home, they will look for those specific brands. So he talks about M-Pesa for Kenya, and, you know, any Kenyan, as an example, that's living abroad that wants to send money back home will always look for the M-Pesa brand, because that has trust and also has value to that individual, and they also know that they can send you know, those funds cross-border as well. So that brings out an enormous opportunity for traditional banks, other fintechs and operators to be able to offer digital wallets as a choice to their customers to do those cross-border remittances as well.
Thank you, thank you. Gonzalo, do you have any? I mean, Swift is a global organization as well. Do you have any examples where you see financial inclusion being sort of helped out by these digital wallets? I know places like India have got massive adoption of them as well. So it's a global phenomenon.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is a global phenomenon, and David did cover most of the aspects that Swift is looking to also. So I need to concur with everything that he was saying, but just to expand on that, on a few words that he said. So for us, the interoperability piece is very important. What we're doing at Swift is we're trying to make it easier for the banks to be able to reach endpoints that they're not reaching at the moment. So when it comes to wallets, that's something that traditionally Swift we were not doing. And so we're now, by integrating with the likes of TerraPay, we are giving the opportunity to our member banks to be able to reach all of those places, which in place comes with a massive opportunity of creating new flows and offering another alternative to their end users. Now the bank is going to be able to pay to these wallets, so the end user in turn is going to be able to continue the relationship they have with the banks and the trust they have with the bank by saying, oh, okay, so now I can pay there, and it's actually a trusted method because I do trust my bank, so I don't need to go somewhere else to actually reach my wallet as I had to do before. So I think that's a one very, very big opportunity, both for the banks and the person sending the money. And if you look at it from the other angle, the biggest opportunity for me is the person receiving it is going to receive it in a faster way, in a trusted way, because it's coming from a trusted source, and it's also going to be a lot simpler. And of course, that end-to-end flow, it's what we're trying to make it as easy and cost-effective as possible, both for the end user sending the money, but also for the bank enabling the service. We don't want it to add a burden or making a service too cumbersome and expensive for the banks. So the solution that we came up with is reutilizing everything that they already have with Swift, and just make it as simple as possible and as fast as possible to go to market with this solution, so they can offer this service to their customers as soon as possible.
Thank you. And then obviously we come back to the consumer and the merchant side of it. And I mean, in many markets, things like these wallets are being used to make government aid payouts and things like that. We're seeing micro loans being used to get out to the sort of individuals and SMEs in those marketplaces. It can develop a lot of positive things for that merchant community and for the SME community. Can you expand a bit on that, Natasha?
Yeah, no problem. And I think when we talk about payments inclusion, I think what wallets do, it creates cultural inclusion. And I really feel that that's a very strong attribute of the wallet, that cultural inclusion is at the heart of what a wallet does. So if I think about what are the complexities that retailers have in relation to this, because they want to be able to, and I love the solution, I love what TerraPay are doing, because it bridges the gap between integration complexity into wallet. It looks after, regulatory compliance. Are things going to work or aren't they going to work? And I think that's where the accessibility enables merchants to be able to have that cultural inclusion as well as payments inclusion within their ecosystems. And I think from a retailer perspective, we're trying to just drive more engagement. We're trying to drive more GMV within our environments, and that is all about more ways to pay enables that. And I think that's probably one of the most exciting things that comes from building ecosystems. This unity that TerraPay, are at the heart of, I think it really meets the needs of so many different environments throughout the whole value chain, and merchants and services of all kinds. And I think it's super exciting. But for me, it is the way that cultural inclusion is one of the best byproducts of what the wallet community connecting together actually delivers. So I'm super excited.
And on that, one of the questions that's come in is quite interesting. It's directed at you, David, at TerraPay. I don't know whether you've read it. It's the first one, and it says, "Is TerraPay considering any partnerships in Saudi, given the country's goal to expand their number of fintech companies to over 500 and achieve an 80% cashless society by 2030?" So obviously that there's quite a lot of financially excluded and a lot of diaspora in that area of Saudi Arabia. Certainly, it sounds like an ideal place for a TerraPay solution. Is that something on your wish list or whatever?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And you'll find, these pockets, in these specific regions, Saudi Arabia, GCC. Is certainly one of them. If you look at the diaspora that's living and working in this particular region, they're sending funds back home, and they're doing this on a daily basis. And traditionally, how they've been doing that was that they would go to these exchange houses and they would queue up. And it would be very laborious to do so, and cost-wise as well. And now actually what they've done in the region is the exchange houses have slightly changed tack and they've gone digital. And we've also seen how the workforce is paid as well, is being, creating that digital payment. So they're then able to use the apps and then send those funds back home. And they can also choose, digital wallets on there as well. So we've been working very, very closely within that region with a number of different finance institutions, exchange houses, also banks as well. And banks, we've been talking to a lot of banks around offering and their specific offering to that diaspora to make it easier and faster and more cost effective to be able to send their funds back home to their family and loved ones as well, which is obviously incredibly important, that flow of funds, and doing it instantly, because some of the biggest challenges with financial institutions is when customers are sending their funds is where are the funds, have the funds landed? And we take that pain away, or try to, wherever possible, is creating that instant payment mechanism. So as soon as that transaction has been initiated, within seconds those funds have been delivered. That's extremely important because some of these people rely on the funds to buy food or medical assistance as well. So getting those funds there instantly is super important.
There's also another question that's come in that's relevant to this whole question of inclusion, and I'll drop this open to the panels, but I think maybe it's Gonzalez that's probably the best. What's the panel's thoughts on India's UPI being a tool for financial inclusion? As we know, UPI got banking up from got rid of a lot of the underbanked in India. I think they're about 90% penetration now from something like 30 or 40 originally. All street vendors in India use it. Can it be used like a wallet or in conjunction with it? How can a solution like that be scaled internationally on a common platform protocol? So I think that's a Gonzalo question.
I was actually going to say, I think David would be the best person to answer that. You know why? Because I know you have direct integration with them. So I know you're doing a lot of work with UPI. So you might
Absolutely.
as well give an end-to-end answer to that. Sorry, David, to put you on the spot.
Again, great question. And UPI is incredibly important, and when you look at India specifically, there's a huge number of banks. Obviously, it has most people, the population in from one country, 1.4 billion plus people. So thinking about how you're moving money around India, sending money to India, or even internally as well, is very complex. And I think UPI have done an amazing job in terms of being able to create the real-time payment rails within that country to be able to connect to mobile wallets and financial services within that country and make it easier. So things like pre-validation piece as well, which again is super important because this cuts down on uncertainty and fraud. And delivers a seamless transaction experience. So UPI is actually a fantastic model to use as a user case, because then you can look at a country like Brazil with Pix, and Pix does this similar thing, because then it creates the real-time rails of sending money cross-border and doing it on a 24/7, 365 basis. So these are the blueprints, and there are other examples of real-time payment rails across Asia as well, that can allow these transactions to operate outside of traditional banking hours, if you like, and connect into the wallets and the other stored value tools that consumers are using. So UPI is a great example, and they've paved the way as one of those examples around the world, and there are many more which will be coming down the line, which will be fantastic. But it's definitely the way forward, and it's definitely the future.
Thank you, David. And Gonzalo, we do have another question, and you have put your hand up to answer it, which it does
Yes.
relate to you both, actually. It's saying, in terms of Swift's integration with TerraPay, will this allow banks to simply send a Swift message that will then be translated into a wallet transaction, and will it be API integrated? So over to you.
I will take that one this time. So the short answer is yes. The solution that we jointly designed with TerraPay is, as I was mentioning before, is to make it as simple as possible for the financial institutions sending the payment to the wallet to reutilize everything that they already have at the moment. So we are trying to make it seamless. So whatever you're using at the moment, if it's an API to send a message or if it's a PAC008, you will reutilize that. So in essence, is what you said. You're gonna send that API payment or PAC008 payment. You're gonna send it to us. We are gonna route it to TerraPay. TerraPay is gonna open it up and do a series of controls, anti-money laundering, beneficiary details validation, etc. And if everything is fine, they're going to convert it to the wallet standard, and they're going to send it within their own network to the wallet to be credited on the other side.
Thank you, Gonzalo. And to make sure we're on track, I'm moving on to our next question. And all the three questions that are on the Q&A bit all kind of fit into this anyway. So what are the biggest global challenges to connecting digital wallets with traditional financial institutions? And this is obviously looking at the issues like legacy systems, the interoperability, how you can scale it, and then you've got the whole thing about what happens on regulation, cultural and adoption issues that Natasha obviously understands. And then obviously you've got the whole FX piece. So Natasha, can I ask you to kick off on this question? It seems a lot of it's about how it works in practice and what it feels like. What's the look and feel of this?
Yeah, and definitely. And I think sort of the biggest concern is settlement, right? If you're a merchant and you want to offer wallets of all from all different countries to create that cultural inclusion. And what I mean by that is I'm a retailer here in the UK, and I want to be able to cater to a community of tourists that are coming in who are used to using UPI or PIX or any of their traditional payment methods. And if I don't offer that, then I'm going to be in trouble. And I mean, in my LinkedIn introduction to actually join the panel, I used a real case scenario of standing at the FinTech conference in Singapore and my lovely colleague queuing for his kebab, only after half an hour to come to me and say I couldn't pay for it, no kebab. And the look on his face, not only because of the heat, but also because he was starving, was not great. And so in that experience, a local vendor only offering local wallets is not ideal for an international conference where people actually are going to need to use an international wallet or another way to pay. And when I think about that from a merchant perspective, it is actually all about settlement. And it's like, how do I get settled if I am a merchant sitting in a country offering wallets that are not domiciled where I am? And I think that these are some of the great things that these guys are getting up to in relation to that globalization and the plethora of wallets, and which one do I choose? But actually, can I be assured as a merchant that I'm actually going to get paid at the end of the day? So with my little story, I'm going to throw to David and say, David, right, in your modern world, how is that now being solved? So I'm keen to understand, how you see that, because that's happening all the time right now.
Yeah, and I think, from my recent experience actually of traveling to Beijing for a conference there, I had the experience of, downloading Alipay and then connecting my card to the Alipay wallet. And I wasn't sure, is this actually going to work or not when I go to a merchant and buy something. But actually, it was easy to do to actually set it up. But also, it was even easier when I was at the merchant. So I could create a QR code on that wallet, and the merchant could just scan it for the value of the transaction, and it was done literally seconds. So easy to do and seamless. So it was a great experience for me to download that wallet and use that wallet. And it was also, common practice and also great for the merchant because, being a tourist coming in, and buying all sorts of goods and sweets and stuff and everything else for my family. It was just very, very simple, very easy. So I think again it's going back to things like the interoperability piece, making it easy, safe, secure, giving the consumer choice. Is really important to have all of those factors. So for me as someone as being able to use that wallet and have all the different services and select on that wallet. It's a real pleasure to use it because it's just so easy. So I think if you take that and then you look at it to various standards and globally, looking at digital wallets and the function of digital wallets and how they can complement the use of anyone traveling globally to be able to pay in the way that they want to pay at whether it be a till, whether it be online or any other way. It's making that a seamless experience, a secure experience, and making it work through interoperability with different systems.
And there's two questions come in quite similar that and they're both about how merchants integrate with wallets. I don't know whether that's one for you, Natasha. How does a merchant accept? One says, could you please clarify the procedure for an SME merchant to access a digital wallet ecosystem for marketplace operating? And then another one says, are any merchants and billers accepting payments into their own wallets, and do digital currencies come into this? So
Yeah.
two questions in one, I think.
Yeah, so look, definitely wallets are available for merchants to be able to install in their checkouts, and settlement can be to the wallet or can be settled to a bank account. Obviously, if it's going to go for the leap into a bank account, there are complexities around FX and some of those other considerations where there are losses. But I mean, I think this sort of globalization is helping merchants incredibly in terms of customer base. The problem is the plethora, right? When you think about which one do I install, which one's actually going to work for me, where are these international customers really coming from? I think that's where it gets a little bit difficult. But the thing with this is that so many retailers are looking to wallets for increased loyalty. They're looking to them for faster checkout, and they're looking to them for global reach. And so the more we can solve the problem around the settlement piece, whether it be to the merchant into a wallet for them to then resettle, and what is the procedure for resettlement? Is it, if it's cross-border, does it go into some sort of digital currency before it hits the other bank account? And I think Gonzalo and David are really sort of at the forefront of all of these challenges that occur within the ecosystem. So it'd be amazing to understand, but I think the availability is there, and there are absolutely ways to do it, and there are global wallets out there already. But where merchants need to feel confident that this is going to be something that's great for them is that they're not losing out in this value chain, right? So they're not losing out by providing this value of these digital wallets. They're not losing out in settlement. So I think that's the thing that needs to be addressed, but I think it's absolutely being addressed at the moment, and I think we're going to get better and better at it in terms of the movement of funds.
And a similar question, but this is particularly TerraPay. I don't know. You're getting a lot of questions, David. Sorry. But did TerraPay have a way to pay in various African countries currencies without having to do an FX via dollars? For example, if I send money from my wallet in Congo to my brother's wallet in Egypt. Nice, easy one for you.
Yeah, so it really depends on the country. So again, central bank, all wallets, stored value wallets are controlled by the central bank. They have to be regulated, and of course, all countries may have restrictions on specific currencies and FX. So it's really a case by case basis. That question really. So you just really have to look at it on a case by case scenario.
And I think we have a similar question about Saudi, and a registered charity in the UK wants to receive funds into its wallet from Saudi, but they can't process Saudi issued cards. Are there any fintech platforms or solutions that can process cross-border payments from Saudi? There you go. Any clues on that?
Again, it would be something through from a regulatory perspective. So it's just looking at, can you accept funds from Saudi? Yes, you can do a cross-border transaction, of course. How you do that is the important thing. So, bank transfer, obviously, yes, you can do that today through a SWIFT. Doing it through a wallet, that's a slightly different scenario.
So we now got a few questions that follow on from, I mean, some of the issues that you're going to get, including the sort of question of jurisdictional variances. So regulatory frameworks for digital wallets and trad banking differ across regions. And we've had a few questions that have come through on this. So one is, does a digital wallet solution ensure robust regulatory and compliance adherence for real-time know your transaction monitoring and fraud management, particularly in detecting and reporting suspicious patterns, unauthorized transactions, and anomalies across multiple jurisdictions, whilst addressing evolving global AML, CTF, and fraud prevention requirements? Basically, does it cover AML? I guess in a
And yeah, I mean, a great compliance question. And yes, because again, from a perspective, as I said before, stored value wallets have to comply the same way as banks would do with the central bank. So all transactions have to be reported. Transactions are also audited as well. So wallets will do their own screening, sanction screenings as well for the wallet holders, but also for the transactions that are also coming in as well from the sender to the beneficiary. TerraPay also has our ongoing monitoring and sanction screening checks and compliance checks. And really at the core of what we do is, we are a risk management and compliance company as well. So we work really very closely with the regulatory authorities, and we're regulated and licensed in more than 30 countries around the world today. So that process is taken very, very seriously. It's part of the core DNA of what TerraPay does, and obviously works very closely with the central banks where we're licensed in those regions, and with all of the wallet providers that we work with on our platform today.
Thank you. Thank you. We are getting so many questions, so I'm going to have to say that some of these questions we'll answer offline afterwards. Otherwise, we're not going to get through this panel. But the panel is all about taking on questions. There's another one about, do you take on startups for serving underbanked customers? I'm pretty sure the answer is probably yes. How is onboarding of wallet providers done? I mean, I'm pretty sure that's pretty standard, and it will depend on which region and which regulation and which jurisdiction you're in for that.
Yeah.
So we'll assume we've answered those ones, but let's get Gonzalez back in here on this regulation and compliance. I mean, Swift, global company as well, like TerraPay. How is compliance and regulation dealt with when you do everything cross-border?
Well, it's a long answer, but just that's part of the challenges, right? So the original question before all the questions that we got from the audience was about what are the challenges that we see, right, when we try to enable payment to wallets. And of course, compliance and regulations is one of the biggest ones. And as David was saying, that is depending on the geography. You're going to have different regulations and different things you need to comply with. Luckily, the participation of TerraPay, as David was saying, they are very big in in doing all of those checks, and they are regulated by different markets. They hold licenses in different regions, so they will do all of those checks to make it sure that everything is under control, and to provide that trust and that peace of mind to the financial institution sending the money, and also to the end user sending the money. And from a bank's perspective, everything that they already have in place, and the fact that they're using SWIFT, they can reutilize whatever means that they have, and whatever compliance checks and engines that they have on their own. So if you look at it from an end-to-end perspective, any banks, they will have their own internal compliance department, and they will do any checks, as they are doing nowadays, to send any cross-border transaction to any other country. So they can reutilize all of that. But on top of that, when the payment gets to TerraPay, they're going to do their own checks on top of that. So I would say that this solution will have it double covered, that everything is being checked as per the regulations to that particular corridor. And if there is any exceptions, because we do find exceptions, TerraPay will be stopping that, and will be contacting the sender for more information, or to rectify whatever is needed.
So I noticed we've only got 15 minutes left, so I want to really look at a bit of a question, and we haven't heard from Natasha for a while. Natasha, what's your view of the future developments in this space? Where are we going in the next 5 years in the world of digital wallet?
Yeah, look, I think we're in right now and going forward, evolving payment preferences, right? We're led by the consumer. It is about consumer demand. It's about convenience and speed. It's about alternative payment methods. And then within the alternative payment methods, alternative things that the alternative payments are doing, which I think is super exciting. And we see, a traditional digital wallet like PayPal going into installments, and really doing an amazing job of installments, and I know that it's been extremely popular for them. So I think that that's very interesting. I think what we need to see is a standardization of digital wallet integrations. We need to see more innovation around standardization. So we need to see a regulation shift, I think, to help compliance and to help merchants really in the way that they navigate the wallets. I think embedded services are what people are looking for right now. And I think, if I think about wallets, they offer loyalty, they are financing, they are sort of everything in one, and they create a massive comfort level for consumers. And I think that that is one of the super exciting things that we're going to see. And as a result of that, we're going to see those increasing basket values and higher GMV for merchants. And that's really where it's all about. And I think also, I don't want to bring up the word, but I think the technology advancement, and we talk about the thing that, one of the things that we love is the hyper-personalized checkout, which is the checkout being able to recognize who you are as soon as you identify yourself, and then deliver the payment method. And we're excited to be at the forefront of that in terms of how we're delivering and working with merchants and having that sort of intuition. And I think that, a checkout of the future is going to be one where a merchant installs hundreds of payment methods, really. And I know that sounds daunting, but basically the technology that we're experiencing now enables the personalization, even though hundreds are sitting there. So it says basket value this, items that, here comes Natasha, let's give her these payment methods. We know how she likes to pay. And I'm super excited of the role that wallets play with that. And I think that's what we're going to start seeing. Now, if we're able to do things like that within this ecosystem, what that means is that the retailers win and the consumers win. And obviously the wallets then sit there on their own merit in terms of the loyalty and what they offer consumers, and people will lead with their feet. So that's my 5-year prediction on this space. I'm super excited about it.
That sounds great. Gonzalo, do you want to give your prediction for the next 5 years?
Yeah, well, I don't want to say prediction or try to see the future, but we're definitely going to where Natasha was saying, and we're seeing more and more use cases for digital wallets. So people are using digital wallets for more things They started with something, now they're using it for many other things, and potentially in the future, more stuff is going to be paid by using a digital wallet. So we need to be ready for that with the technology to be able to cater for that. From our perspective, what we are trying to do with this interoperability work is try to be ready to bring more and more use cases and more endpoints for the banks to be able to enable that without reinventing the wheel. So if we look into 5 years in the future, we might be talking about integrating new services that we are not offering at the moment, like payment to cards or CBDC wallets and things that might pop up in the future that we are not seeing right now. But definitely we need to be ready for that. So just as an example, one of the things that we were talking, we talk about many use cases like a remote worker being paid or me sending money back home. But David and I, and keep me honest, David, when we talk to different banks, we find new use cases every time. So one example is someone said, okay, we can think of a use case of paying pensions of people from our country that are living abroad. And we didn't think about that as being a potential use case, and now it is. So what I'm trying to say is that we are going to be learning as we go. So we can predict some things, but some other things we are going to be learning as they evolve, because this is a fast-moving world, and wallets is moving very fast.
And sort of merging both of the bits that you've said, there is a question that I think I can pass to David on this one, from another David, actually, David Ribinowitz. In terms of interoperability, is there any wallet that communicates with all others? What we observe is a growing number of wallets worldwide, and many merchants end up with multiple QR codes for payments. What are the panel's thoughts on a unified structure or similar APIs, similar to how Pix and UPI operate? I think that's kind of looking into the future. Is that going to happen in the next 5 years, David, something like that, or is it happening already?
Yeah, and again, fantastic question, because it's really what we at TerraPay have been thinking about a lot. And we earlier this year we created the Wallet Interoperability Council to really look at the future of digital wallets. And we've worked with a number of co-founding members that are digital wallets themselves, and there will be more joining. And we're looking at these challenges because the digital wallets are not all standardized, so they will have different technology, they'll have different code, and they don't have a unified platform to talk to one another. So what we are doing is looking at obviously the innovation and also balancing that with regulation as well. So it's important that that you have great ideas and innovation which should be harnessed, but also have that balance from a regulatory perspective and get them involved as well at early stages. So the Interoperability Council is all about the innovation, the regulation part, and looking at how we can break down the barriers for wallets to communicate directly to each other. So, as you were saying, imagine in a world where, if I have an M-Pesa wallet and I want to send funds to a GCash wallet in the Philippines, I can do that, no problem at all. I can also, send funds to a Nequi wallet in Colombia, or, a PayPal wallet, or, XYZ, so it's really, really important the fact that we're creating this council to then look at all of these challenges, because one thing is for sure, is that there will be more digital wallets that will be evolving. There will be more people utilizing those digital wallets, and more money moving, more digital money moving in these wallets. So it's really important to be at the forefront of this, to look at how we can do the standardization. So like how Swift, as an example, has done the standardization messaging between banks, we should then need to look at how we're doing this with wallets, working with the regulators, and ultimately everything benefiting the consumer to be able to utilize this. So whether they're sending funds from one wallet to another or traveling, to the other side of the world and then paying for goods and services at the point of sale to the merchants, it should be seamless. And we don't have that today. So that is really how I see this evolving and how the future of digital wallets will evolve going forward.
Now, there are a couple. One thing I've just picked up generally about this whole area as well, that's come through some of the questions that we might be able to just touch on before we close, is the question of security and specifically cybersecurity of wallets. How are we dealing with that, and how can we make sure AI bots and quantum computing don't remove the wonders of this system we're creating? Gonzalo.
Yeah.
David, you can have a think about it while he speaks. You're on mute, Gonzalo. In fact,
Sorry.
everyone. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So that's a very, very good question. So Swift is very risk averse when it comes to security. So if we look at the integration between the banks and us, and everything I was saying that we are going to be reutilizing, so we are going to be having the same levels of security with the connectivity to any of the banks sending the money, sending the integrations to us. So all of those levels of security are going to remain the same. And as you know, Swift is constantly upgrading the levels of security and keeping up with the new trends and threats. And we did the same thing with TerraPay, because TerraPay is a supervised institution in our network, so they have the same levels of security when it comes to connecting to us. And that's as far as we can see. But then we have the last leg, which is the part that I think actually the question was addressed to, which is between TerraPay and all these wallets, right? And I believe TerraPay will have a similar approach to how they do things with wallets when they do the integrations, and they will have all the framework to integrate them and the steps to make it very robust and secure. But David, I'm just going to leave it there. So if you want to add anything on top of that, more than welcome to.
You want to add something, David? We got 3 minutes left, so you can have a last say, then Natasha, and then I'll close off.
No, it's just really to concur with that. What Gonzalo was saying, it's incredibly important that safety, security, compliance is at the heart of everything that we do, because this is really the glue which kind of puts all of this together. So it's important, as I said before, that we're working, to have innovation, but also balance that with, obviously, from a regulatory perspective as well. So that's really key. So that's really all I'll say. I'll pass over to Natasha.
Natasha, you're gonna close off for the panelists. What final words?
Wow. Okay. Well, it's been
wonderful audience.
It's been an honor, Robert. It's been really great, David, Gonzalo. Look, I think the wallets are doing a great job actually themselves, to be honest with you. And I think technology, middleware, aggregators, Unity players, etc., we all play a role. But I think if I think about some of the measures that the actual individual wallets are going to protect their consumers and their whole value chain, I think it's pretty impressive, I'll be honest with you. And I think that their ability to identify fraudsters, but also so many of them who actually offer consumer protection, right? So we do see that in certainly wallets that are extremely popular out there. And I think that trusted consumer protection, this is a handshake. This is not just the wallet's problem, the Unity partners problem, you know, the acquiring technology, delivering it to merchants problem. This is a problem, and it's a handshake, I think, between everyone. And ultimately, it's super important for consumers that they know that that handshake has taken place. So this has been a really fun panel to be part of. Some really great insights from lots of different angles. So thank you for having me.
So that's it for everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you especially to our great panelists. You answered all the questions really well. There are a further 15 open questions. Majority, David, are down to you, I'm afraid. They've all got the word TerraPay in them, so you're going to have to deal with that. But no, I think thank you for the audience as well. I mean, I have to say we had some amazing questions. So it's been really good interaction between you and our panelists. Yeah, I think it was a very thought-provoking session. If you do have any questions, specifically post this. Events@thepaymentsassociation.org is who you should email. You will also all be shortly receiving a survey on the webinar, and we'd really appreciate it because your feedback means we can do better in the future. And you will also receive a follow-up email in 48 hours time, which will give you a link to today's recording. So you can all listen to us all again, which will be fabulous. So on behalf of the Payments Association, TerraPay, and our wonderful speakers, David, Gonzalo, and Natasha, thank you for joining us today, and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye all.